What is going on, collectors? Optical 20 back for another video review. Today we're going to take a look at Lord of the Rings from Asmus Collectibles Elven Warrior. And you can order this figure at bigbadtoystore.com or directly from Asmus. I'll put the links down below. I always wanted to have this Elven Warrior because I do have the Elven Archer. And I feel like, hey man, I'm not going to army build him because that's going to be expensive. However, I wanted each to flank Elrond. And this is numbered, by the way. You can see 56. Pretty good number here out of 1,500. And first and foremost, I want to thank Asmus for making this review possible. But I mean, you could army build them. They're not that expensive, I believe. They're less than like a stormtrooper or something like that. So, but I always wanted to. I couldn't do that. But that scene from the opening of Lord of the Rings, where the elves were fighting the orcs, and you see Sauron in there. That just, when the Elven Warrior just put their blades up, when the orcs were coming, that was badass. You gotta admit. I think it's the fight of, I don't know. Battle of Kamadun, something like that. I don't know, but it was awesome. And that kind of, I don't know, man. There's something about warriors and knights and people with armor that just gets me drawn into them. And that's why I do love Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, the 300, those kind of things. I just get drawn into them. So let's take a look at the accessories. So you got fisted hands, you got the open palm hands, and you got the weapon holding hands. Now you see his blade in here. He's the elvish armor anyway. So this is nicely done. This doesn't come. This is what separates it from the Elven Archer. So ideally you have two of each. You have two Elven Warrior, two Elven Archer. I can't pronounce that, but this is made out of die-cast. Beautiful. Well, to be fair, most Asmus weapons are made out of die-cast anyway. It adds value to it because even this blade right here, this is something that they could share. Both the Archer and the Warrior does have this kind of spear looking, sword. I don't even know what you call this, but it's awesome. You do have those elvish symbols in there as well, but it is the top part is the bottom part is plastic, the wooden look kind of thingy, but the top part is die-cast. He does come with this massive shield as well, so if you want to have that flank looking where they're kind of shielding, kind of like 300, it is possible. You see the back part here. Pretty nice. Everything here is cool. This is a bit heavy as well. This is the only, I would say, downside to having a quality, I guess, holding weapons and all that stuff. It becomes heavy, and over time, the joints, it's not good for the joints. Let's just put it this way. The helmet as well looks pretty cool, which is most likely gonna stay with your figure for a long time. And you got the standard base Lord of the Rings. So let's look at the tailoring. Obviously the tailoring is always good when it comes to Asmus. So he does have this sash, this kind of gold or bluish tint to it. Underneath you can see, I don't know if that's supposed to be, that shouldn't be chainmail or something, but he is surrounded by armor. But nonetheless, the articulation is not hindered at all with this kind of like gold inspired theme. They're elves, so they're kind of fancy. It's split cut boot design, which is cool, so you can move it around. That is awesome as well. And there is a wire on the edge of this kind of like blue foiled looking, I don't know what you call it, sash. It goes all the way in his back, and it's kind of tied into his waist. And now as far as his sheath, you could do that as well on the back. So you just kind of tie it up. It's pretty easy. It does come in the instruction. You do have a hoodie. So optional. Of course, you can't put the hoodie on if you put the helmet on, because that's going to be too tall. But he also have, the armors are separated in pieces. So you got the gauntlet, you got the bicep armor, so it doesn't hinder any articulation as well. You got those kind of velvet type pants and again the split cut boot there, but he also kind of have this skirt. So there's a lot of levels and layers into his tailoring, which makes it pretty awesome. So the head sculpt is pretty much the same as like a generic elvish face, I would assume. So you don't see the ears, so you don't see the elvish ears, but the head sculpt, decent. You're barely gonna see them once you put the helmet on, and you can see the sword, but he does have that sparkly, I don't know, glittery armor underneath that's covering his ears, I guess, so they don't, you know, when you get in battle, you don't damage their pretty faces because they're elves. But yeah, the generic face, I have no problem with it whatsoever. It's pretty cool. And then you put the helmet on, and it doesn't come off. Now, the what do you call it? The fabric around the face kind of helps out, if I might add. When you put the helmet on, it kind of protects it from rubbing into the plastic of the helmet. Even though, again, you might not even display this guy without the helmet on, like, ever. So it's not like, even if it does stain, it's a big deal. But just, you know, just to put it out there, the helmet does not have any padding inside. But if you rotate it around here, it's not even touching the face completely. And it does have this nice snug fit. So it's not, you know, the nose part, it's not touching the tip of the nose either. So, you know, over time, you're not going to be worried that, hey, is it going to stain and all that stuff. You could have it, you don't see it here, but there's a close, you know, I guess, gap between the tip of the nose and that helmet. So it doesn't need to be touching. As far as articulation, like I mentioned earlier, you know, the head sculpt, you can rotate it pretty much all over the place. I believe the shoulders are ratcheted as well. Yeah, it is. You can move forward. There is no hindrance in articulation here. Look at that tight elbow bend on the waist. Of course, there is a little bit of hindrance because, you know, the armor here, but in the sash. But for the most part, you could still get some movement. Now, this piece right here, you can move it around. You can have him kick upwards here, which is pretty high. And then you got some toe articulation here, ankle. And not toe, ankle, I mean, and then the knees you can bend, you know, pretty nicely in here. You could do a myriad of poses with this figure, but for the most part, for me at least, he's just gonna flank. And then you get some ab crunch here. Elrond, that's their main purpose. They are those nice armies, and again, all the articulation here, you know, bicep swivel and like leg swivel as well. Now let's do some poses. So this is the moment what I was talking about earlier. Very underrated. I do love this scene a lot. Pretty badass when the elves were just there holding their line, and then when the orcs came up running, you know, they just kind of pulled up their sword, which is what they're holding in the background, as you can see here. I love that scene, man. Very underrated, like I mentioned earlier. And the shield, as you can see here on the scene here, they're not holding any shield. They're just ready to just swing their sword forward, but the shield just gives it a whole new element. It looks beautiful, especially if you have two. Look at this. And one is archer and one is the warrior. I think they look pretty great. Of course, the difference is the archer does have that quiver behind him compared to the warrior, who does have on his waist at least the sheath. So that is so it looks a little bit tighter when it comes to the warrior because of it kind of like he does have an extra belt compared to the archer, who has more of a backpack look. He does have the archer here, so you can be like, hey, they're not uniform. One is holding a bow and one is holding a sword. So it doesn't really look good, you know, if they're standing next to each other, because like I said, ideally you have two of each, but if you want to have more of a uniform look, especially if you're going to put him next to Elrond with a shield on, this is the best combo out there. Now, you could remove the archer's quiver if you want to. I won't, but this gives them individuality, yet they're still pretty uniform. As you can see here, they're just holding the spear and the shield next to Elrond. Man, that looks pretty badass. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but Again, big Lord of the Rings fan, so that's an equivalent of me like Vader with 2 stormtroopers. So my final thoughts on this Elven Warrior is pretty positive. I do like it. It looks better when it comes in pairs. This is one of those things where, hey, you know what, you army build and all that stuff. You don't have to, but again, it looks better when it comes in pairs, because as you saw earlier with Elrond, in display wise, you put him on a Detolf, it just stands out, right? Like if you have one, and you can have, you need one, because if you have one Elven Warrior, and if you're into photography, you could just kind of copy and paste this guy and create that scene that you have earlier. Obviously in the display it's not going to work, but for your digital needs, photography, it would work. Overall, pretty happy with this. Which one do I like better, the Elven Warrior or the Archer? I might say I do like the Elven Warrior a little bit better. I thought I was gonna like the Archer because, you know, when you think about elves, you think about Legolas and archery. But the sword that they do have, and especially the opening scene of the movie, I think that kind of draws me in to the Warrior a little bit more. But you can't go wrong with either one. You really can't. So if you're having trouble, just buy one of each. And like I mentioned earlier, you know, you display them and it would look great. But thank you for watching, guys. Hopefully you do like this video. Give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitch. And I'll see you guys in the next video.